Are you using the frequencies that you've been entrusted with in their shadow form because you're so broken and perhaps desperate and needful of the affirmation and applause of others that all your communication is really trying to draw them to you? That's my win. That we stop normalizing the worst attributes of the human character and begin to elevate. To stop letting ideals simply be ideals, but to become who we are. And I realized almost every model we have in our pop culture of communication is negative. And then we wonder why we have so many broken relationships. We wonder why we feel so alone. We wonder why we feel so disconnected. And we wonder why we've not stepped into the full power that has been given us. The power of words are a life-giving force. They are a life source that we can give to each other at no cost. What does it cost you to speak life into another human being? The only problem, of course, is it's impossible to speak life when you do not have life, because you only speak what you are. And I know from generations of empirical evidence that when people speak words of derision, when they demean you, when they devalue you, when they call you a fool, that you become rotten. Isn't it odd that so oftentimes we become the people we hate? That we become the very things that have broken us. We become the very things that have shattered us. And so someone was demeaning to you and it broke you, so then you become demeaning to everyone else because you're broken. Someone told you you were inadequate and you were not enough and you were insignificant, and it shaped you in such a negative force and you hated it, but then you find yourself giving away that same bitterness and venom and toxicity to other people. And there's so much empirical evidence of this third space. It's odd. More destructive to the human spirit than being spoken to negatively is to be completely ignored. I am absolutely convinced it's why children act up. See, when a child is not seen when they're good, they will become bad. Because they desperately want to be seen. When a teenager wants to be seen and they're good but they're invisible, they will become bad. Because they'd rather have a reaction. Just tell me that you see me. And that's better than treating me like I'm invisible. And I don't know about jars of rice, but I do know about the human spirit. The reason I wanted to begin today talking about communication is I hope out of the arena. Phil Jones asked me, what's a win for you? It's a great question. My win is that we create a movement of humanity, that we become the best versions of ourselves, and that we pass it on to every person we meet. That's my win. That we stop normalizing the worst attributes of the human character and begin to elevate. To stop letting ideals simply be ideals, but to become who we are. I did have this one thought about how in the story of Jesus, after the crucifixion and the resurrection, he's walking down a street called Emmaus with a couple of guys. And he's acting like he doesn't know what's going on. He's not letting him know who he is. And they're saying, have you not heard what's happened? And they're telling him the whole story of Jesus. I love that. And they're telling Jesus all about himself. And when they get to the end of the road, this is how I know Jesus is also an artist. Because it says that Jesus acted like he was going to keep going. Right? Little theater. They said, please stay with us. Okay. And then when he left, they said, did not his words burn in our hearts? That's what I hope happens over the next 2 days. I hope that somewhere in every conversation, words will burn in your heart. The words that you need. Maybe for you it might be a word that lets you know that you matter. It might be a word to let you know other people matter. It might be a word that brings the healing that you've longed for all of your life, or it might be a word that brings the strength you've needed to live the courageous future that you long for. And by the way, through all of this research and lifelong experience, I developed a process called the 7 frequencies of communication. I'm not saying these are the only frequencies that exist, but I think they're the 7 dominant frequencies from which we interact every day. And in those 7 frequencies, I break down both the positive expression of those frequencies and the shadow expression of those frequencies. And what really is exciting for me is when I get to listen to my friends who speak and I can hear their frequencies. And if you have ever read Carol Dweck's book, Mindset, one of the things I think is so important about the 7 frequencies that it's not a fixed mindset. It's not like you have this one frequency and that's all you got. You may be only using one frequency, that's because that's all you've used. But what you find as people become more textured and more powerful and more connected communicators is that they begin to use more than one frequency. And sometimes they're using multiple frequencies at one time and something explosive happens in your soul and you can't even explain it. It's the individuals on the road of Emmaus saying, "Did not his words burn in our hearts?" And I don't have time this morning to walk through the 7 frequencies, but what I want to challenge you is first on the big picture of human communication. Are you using your communication frequencies to invest in others, to serve others, to build others, to develop others, to grow others? What kind of universe are you creating inside of other people through the words that you speak? Or are you using the frequencies that you've been entrusted with in their shadow form because you are so broken and perhaps desperate and needful of the affirmation and applause of others that all your communication is really trying to draw them to you? When I first developed the 7 frequencies, it was sort of accidental. We'd created the art of communication, and then Aaron came up to me and said, "Hey, Dad, could you create like a 15-minute giveaway where we could just put it online, give it away, and people will know more about the art of communication?" And I thought, okay, well, it needs to have real value. What can I do in 15 minutes? And then I just started thinking about what I don't talk about. Because sometimes I'm a little nervous to tell you what I really think. And sometimes Kim's even more nervous for me to tell you what I really think. See, I know this from life experience. It embarrasses my family. I've traveled the world. I walk into cafes or restaurants. I eavesdrop, overhear accidentally other people having a conversation in another language, and I'll walk up to them and I'll say, "Did you just say this?" I would say 90% of the time, I'm right. And they'll go, "Oh, do you speak Mandarin?" And I say, "No, I speak human." And I've trained myself to listen to people in other parts of the world and to be able to translate what they're saying without even knowing the language. Because what you're listening to right now are sounds. Los llamamos palabras, un idioma. Pero la verdad es que es algo más. See, now, for some of you, that was just a sound and it had no meaning behind it. There are tribes in Africa who use clicking sounds to communicate. I hope I did not say anything offensive. Because we humans are meaning machines. We transfer meaning, we transfer essence, we transfer life. So I couldn't sleep for maybe 3 or 4 days. I was having cold sweats every night just looking at these frequencies. I saw the frequencies in my mind. I think it was one night, Saturday night, it was like 5 in the morning, I'm drenched in sweat, I'm wide awake. Kim said, "What is wrong with you? What's going on?" I told her, "I can't sleep, I'm just downloading all of this. And we created our next 3-hour masterclass because you couldn't hold it in 15 minutes. But then I started testing it. I sent out a little feeder out into the world saying, tell me any TV show or movie and I'll find the frequencies of those characters. And everyone said 2 shows, Friends and Succession. I didn't even know Friends was still a thing. You will not let Friends die. You desperately need Friends. And, so I picked Succession. And I went through Succession and I could not find a single one of my 7 frequencies. And I had an anxiety attack. It doesn't work. It doesn't have validity. I'm in trouble. I just put this out in the world. And I just kept looking at Succession, went back season 1, started watching all the characters. I'm like, God, please, somewhere. And then I pulled back. I had my panic attack. I took a deep breath. And then I heard this voice, check the shadows. I said, what? Check the shadows. I went back to Succession and I looked at all the shadow frequencies and I found all 7. Just like that. And I realized almost every model we have in our pop culture of communication is negative. And then we wonder why we have so many broken relationships. We wonder why we feel so alone. We wonder why we feel so disconnected. And we wonder why we've not stepped into the full power that has been given us. Over the next 2 days, listen. Listen not simply to the information, and not simply to the meaning, but listen to the essence. Open your loop. Let it seep in. Let hope and courage and inspiration and dreams, let the impossible seep into your soul and watch who you become in the arena.